I'm Zach Walker. This is another episode of the DIU-ex podcast, joined today by Dr. Ryan Kappedal, recently retired Air Force officer and AI expert. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Zach.
If we could talk about your background, because you have the perfect background for this conversation, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from the Air Force Academy in '99, then went into what was called a 14N now. I think there's still 14N. I was a test director of advanced concept technology demonstrations, which is tech that's going to field in 90 days or less. Our unit, Afotech Det 1, was the unit that fielded the bunker busters, those telephone pole length looking bunker busters in the first Iraq War. So they're definitely a unit that tries to get tech in the field absolutely quickly. So I had a lot of fun fielding tech with them. I went on to get a master's degree at the Air Force Institute of Technology and Operations Research. Then did my Pentagon tour working in Headquarters Air Force A9. A9 Studies and Analysis is kind of the speak truth to power analytical arm of the air staff that was led by Dr. Jackie Henningsen at the time, who's an incredible mentor. Jackie sent me to Iraq to work in U.S. Forces Iraq as a we really didn't use the term data scientist at the time, but I was a data scientist that was unifying like 6 different databases to do daily security analysis and report of all the provinces in Iraq. So after your boss sends you to Iraq, that's a great time to ask her for something. And what I asked her for was a full ride PhD sponsorship at the University of Washington, which she endorsed me for. And then I went off to get my PhD in statistics and machine learning focus, where I worked with the amazing Professor Marina Mila. My follow-on PhD payback tour was teaching at the Air Force Institute of Technology, where I supervised a number of students. I taught statistics, machine learning, Bayesian data analysis. I'm very proud of the students that I got a chance to supervise, and that might be the most enduring impact that I gave to the Air Force. Around that time, I tried to do interesting things on my summer. So this gets into how I came to DIU. Every summer, I tried to pick a different interesting project to do. I found myself out at Lawrence Livermore National Labs one summer, and some of my friends say, "Hey, you should check out what Enrique's doing nowadays." So Enrique Odi, someone I knew from the Air Force Academy, you should bop in on what DIU is doing nowadays. And I went and I visited Enrique here on what was probably half the workspace we're in, and he was whiteboarding out saying, "Okay, if you were to schedule tankers, what would you do?" And this was definitely a whiteboard stage. So I got to witness Enrique and some of his people like doing the first pass on that. Then going forward, I lent Enrique some of my students to help work with him. He seemed to like them enough that he kept saying, "Okay, when are you going to come out here?" My wife was from Napa, California, and she said, I think you need to take me to California for our last assignment. So I told Enrique, "Okay, pull the trigger," and he got me by name requested to come out to the AI/ML portfolio at DIU. So that's the path.
Wow, that's a great story and a remarkable set of experience that basically made you perfectly set for this, because you don't only have a PhD essentially in this. You also have an MBA, right?
I do. I have this. It might be a flaw that I think I get a little antsy if it's been a couple of years and I haven't, engaged in some kind of new education. I believe a person's career should go 3 different states of do, learn, teach, and you should probably revisit those states when one is getting a little bit stale. And into my a couple of years of teaching, I was at a point where I thought it would be fun to maybe get an MBA as I was considering transition into the civilian world. I'd previously done a fellowship for data science for social good at the University of Chicago. So I love the Chicago area. It was very close to Ohio. So there was a nice executive weekend MBA program And so I decided to take it and expand my network beyond the military network and learn a little bit about the business world. And so that was a tremendous amount of fun. So that's how I kind of got there.
Very cool. So, we talk a lot about, well, do we need more PhDs or more MBAs, right, in this defense innovation space? And it seems like the easy answer is we'll just get more Ryan Kappedals.
I mean, if I were to make a choice on those, that's a hard choice to make. I think you need a mix. I don't know if you've ever heard of the data science unicorn. So it's a construct in the data science community that a data science unicorn has deep subject matter expertise, has computer hacking skills, and then has statistical knowledge. And the core Venn diagram is the intersect of those three, and we call them the data science unicorn. The problem with that unicorn concept has become they keep adding more circles. It's like, okay, well, we actually need you to be able to do data engineering, which is different than machine learning modeling, which is different than statistical knowledge. And the circles keep drawing more and more and more. And so the Venn diagram gets smaller. So I actually don't believe unicorns exist. I think you need specialists that can communicate well.
And if you're going to be an Air Force intelligence officer, as we both are, don't forget the PowerPoint circle.
Yes.
That kind of encompasses all of it.
Well, I think that's the communicate well. I don't think it should always be PowerPoint, but I do think being able to communicate your ideas well will give you buy-in better than having the best idea still. I still think the ability to communicate technical means to a non-technical audience will win the day, particularly in the DoD.
And that is a great segue because that is really where you excelled in DIU. And talking about that, being able to communicate, understanding the technical side, communicating perhaps the non-technical aspects to stakeholders. Let's talk about some of the AI projects that you worked in DIU and in DoD. Because you were kind of involved in all of them, right? I mean, there's not one AI project in your time here that you didn't touch in some capacity.
I mean, yeah, I think so. When I joined the portfolio, I was, there wasn't really a data scientist there. So, I think there are several diligence phases that have to occur. There is, in addition, the commercial diligence that, I believe my friend Sean Singleton was probably much more qualified to talk about than I am. The technical diligence component to it, I think, was a measure where I felt improvement could occur. So I found myself doing the technical diligence, calls and phases with a lot of the projects that we launched during my tenure.
So because you do have both sides with the MBA and the PhD, one of the last conversations we had was with Dr. Bernadette Johnson, and a similar question. When a VC evaluates a company, especially an AI company, right? It's the hot thing. If you're AI on a blockchain, you'll get trillions of dollars in funding. Do VCs really effectively evaluate companies for technical capability? Do they have those folks like you, or is it really the business case in general risk capital?
Some firms do. And I think every VC firm has a different strategy and a different path that they go on. I became a big fan of DCVC, Data Collective Venture Capital. We had several meetings with them, and I called them kind of a nerds first VC firm. Like, is the tech real? Is there real tech here that has real impact? So they were tech before hype. I think there are a number of other firms that are like that. And I do, if we talk about like some of the Silicon Valley horror stories, like the Elizabeth Holmes horror story that I'm sure everybody likes to bring up when they say, oh, you're working with VCs, they don't know anything. I think it's worthy of note that there wasn't a single med tech specialized firm that backed her. So there wasn't a single deep biologist on her board. So I think the firms have strategies, and my personal opinion was to look at firms that were more technical diligence first over market share, because while the DoD wants companies that are commercially viable, if market share exists and technical diligence isn't right, a startup can pivot to a different use case and leverage that market share. When we're coming in for a DoD company, for a DoD use case, we need them to solve the problem we asked them to solve. We can't have them say, our platform really didn't work for the thing you wanted, but we can do this other thing well. Sometimes that works, but for the most part, we need the tech to work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you saw several projects kind of start and go to fruition. How did you see that reflected in the actual execution of AI projects for DoD partners?
Well, one of the things that I will say is the technical diligence and the commercial diligence can work hand in hand. One thing that I think there's a common misconception for AI ML technology for the DoD is like, oh God, we got to copy what the big AI ML famous companies are doing, the Googles, the Facebooks, those sorts of companies. And it's worth to know that they controlled and built their own data pipeline, right? They didn't inherit legacy crap data. They didn't inherit legacy systems that were built before the internet existed. We did. So I would argue that part of the commercial diligence phase that mirrors the technical diligence is if an AI/ML company has been successful for what I call large, messy outdoor industries, they're probably a good fit for DoD. So, I'm talking oil and gas, I'm talking commercial shipping and things like that. If a company has a good vertical there, I think they can understand the logistics problems that the DoD faces or the predictive maintenance problems that the DoD faces or things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk a bit more about what it is to mean to have data in the DoD and just why it's so freaking hard to be able to use it?
Well, I think another misconception that particularly DoD people have is their data is special, and their data is unique. Like no data is messed up the way their data is messed up. And having just been in industry for a couple of months, I would beg to differ. Everybody's data is screwed up in uniquely interesting ways, but the methodology for making refining. We use the oil metaphor a lot. There's crude oil with sticks and rocks in it, but the process of refining it into rocket fuel, is very a number of steps and is algorithmic. So if you have crappy spatial temporal data feeds coming in an asynchronous fashion off of your oil field, I don't think that's that much different of a problem than other types of spatial temporal data feeds coming off of, say, intelligence collection sensors or platforms like that. And I think once you can get a DoD partner to open the aperture and think, oh, if they get this problem wrong with this company, they die, or with that they're solving for this industry, they die as a company, and they've been solving it well for a long time. Maybe they can handle our data.
Did you ever run into issues of a DoD partner perhaps not wanting to share or maybe not being able to share? Maybe the DoD didn't even own the data that we needed?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and honestly, data availability issues are kind of part of why I came up with like a 3-step problem curation process that said if I can't check these 3 boxes, we should pass. And the first step is, does data exist in sufficient volume, availability, and quality, and accessibility to inform an AI ML workflow? I think sometimes mistakes have been made by saying yes to a project before there's data on a hard drive in my hands. And I think, organizations like DIU drawing the line saying, we will not go forward until there's either data in a hard drive or data that I can readily give to a commercial partner, because that can hold us up tremendously. So one way to force this is to say, you know what, in the phase two, for those of you familiar with how DIU does vendor selections, in the phase two, we're going to give example data to all the companies and see how they do. And what's neat about that is it becomes a forcing function for the DoD partner to pony up data, and then their minds are put at ease in terms of technical diligence and the ability to do it. So if you can get there, you can force both sides to bring a little bit of their tech and a little bit of their data, and you have a miniature version of what you want to occur at scale once you've moved forward.
It's a very audacious way of looking at a down select, but I mean, quite effective, right? If you can't perform then, you're not going to perform later on. What's the rest of the criteria? I think there's one.
Yeah, so that's the first one. The second is, so I call that the data science problem generically. The next one is what I call the machine learning problem. And the machine learning problem is, from existing data. So every step is takes the output of the last step as its first input. From existing data, can a reasonably performant algorithm be drawn to predict operationally relevant targets in an operationally relevant time frame? So, this gets to the complexity of the amount of compute required and the predictability, particularly in unbalanced class problems, of which there are many in the DoD. So an unbalanced class problem is the number of positives are far less than the number of negatives. One that we're all top of mind is like COVID. If I go out and I sample 100,000 people for COVID, the positive hits are going to be small. So when you have unbalanced class problems, the degree of performance of your algorithm, can be very, very tricky. So we may be able to do a 90% accurate algorithm. And if that's a population that only has 10% positive, a 90% algorithm is saying everybody's negative. Like that's 90% accurate. So this is where the core metric of success and how performant the algorithm is in an operational context must be measured. And if you pass that check, then you move on. Then the final check is what I call the artificial intelligence problem. Given a prediction that is reasonably performant, can a operational process be impacted by that decision or that prediction getting to the right person in the right time, or can it be automated? This is where it is, it becomes AI. Is it AI assist of human decision, or is it AI automation of automated decision? But, being able to predict the thing isn't enough. Being able to predict the thing and getting an action taken differently means you've gone end to end from dirty data to operational impact.
Wow. So data science problem, machine learning problem, and artificial intelligence.
Yes. So the data science problem, the output is clean data. The machine learning problem, the output is a clean prediction. The AI problem, the output is a clean decision.
That makes too much sense. It really does. Can you maybe without too many specifics, can you give an example of where in your time in DIU that worked out extraordinarily well in a project where it all lined up and where
I think the answer, the project that I think we're about to go public with is the Predictive Health program. I think that release is pending. I will say, so the context for Predictive Health is there is a tremendous amount of unutilized and underutilized data in service members' healthcare data sets. A number of slides, pathology slides, have to be held on a shelf for 10 years after that pathology case is active, and then they go to a medical incinerator. So every year, the major hospitals like JBLM, Madigan, like Walter Reed, et cetera, are incinerating 1 million of these data points. Somebody I partnered with, and we later got to join DIU, Commander Niels Olsen, was able to create a workflow so that some of the deaccession data some of these trash slides, so this is the dirty data, right, can be scanned and scrubbed and completely de-identified and labeled. So now we've gone to dirty data to clean data, in which you have a nice picture. You've gone from hard physical media to a nice picture, and then you have a circle drawn on that picture where the cancer is on the slide. So that in turn informed a machine learning workflow. So now we've done near real-time image segmentation of the pathology slide. And then the final step, which will be operationalized, is the augmented reality microscope, in which a new slide put in will have trained algorithms there, in which the pathologist will look through the slide and a new circle highlighting potential cancerous lesions will occur. So we decided that the point of decision for that, the point of impact, and the point of automation had to be at the provider level. There are other cases where the point of impact is at the strategic operations center level. But that's one project in which we started with the intervention in mind, that the lead pathologist that looks at the slide is the mind we have to assist with an AI augmented workflow.
Wow. Now, does this exist in industry, and the DoD is just lagging to catch up? That sounds really amazing.
So this is unique in that the augmented reality microscope has not been fielded in scale in industry, and I know DIU's primary use case is to find commercially viable tech. I will say every component of this, like the high resolution camera, near real time image segmentation of video, every single component of it are components that have been commercialized. But the nudging of a pathologist to make a different diagnosis, or not, to assist their diagnosis through an AI driven workflow, has not been fielded in production in any healthcare system in the country that I'm aware of.
Wow, there's just so many stories of DoD being so far behind. It sounds like a remarkable story for DoD possibly leading.
I mean, it's very much why I went after it. I personally felt that healthcare was a place that we could lead because the incentives are better aligned in healthcare for the DoD than they are in a lot of. So this is the MBA part talking, by the way. The incentive alignment. There's so many different payers and so many different healthcare systems that I think it becomes challenging. But if you make the use case to the DoD that I spent $200,000 training this pilot, and now he's done because he has prostate cancer, that's sunk cost, right? So if you can take advantage of all the DoD data that we have on our patient populations getting cancer or other types of non-communicable diseases, and you have so much control over that soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. Like, you can tell them how to live their life in many, many ways, so that you can also flag them early for disease and say, okay, you are at a different risk state for this. But with the imagery, you can catch that disease when it's tiny, much, much smaller. And the key to any type of cancer or other types of non-communicable diseases that manifest over time is early detection. Whereas, in some cases, the insurance company is going to own this guy for the 3 years he works for that company, and then it becomes someone else's problem. I think we really have the appropriate healthcare incentives to make some massive improvements in the system.
Yeah, no, that really makes sense, and certainly strikes at least close to home for me. I know I've had service members that I've worked with that have not had good outcomes because they've had something that was missed, unfortunately.
I mean, there's not a single person in America that hasn't been touched by cancer in some way, shape, or form. So if you think about us throwing away millions of cancer pathology slides every year that we have, the early detection super drug, AI is a super drug. The early detection key is there in the trash. It's sitting right there. You just have to take that data, clean it up, scan it, turn it into imagery, operationalize it in a viewer. It's literally right there. If you take into account the other big problem with DNA is most people never move within 70 miles of where they were born. So how do you disentangle DNA, geographic effects, environmental effects, and cultural effects when nobody moves? You find a different population, maybe one that moves
I'm feeling you're about to lead to perhaps a population that
moves every 3 to 4 years,
yeah,
as mandated by their vocation, and takes blood tests every 2 years, as mandated by their vocation. So any epigenetic markers, any triggers, any strange DNA proclivities, disambiguated with environment and culture, sitting there, waiting to be exploited. We are not exploiting it.
and that really speaks to the reason why DIU exists, right? Is to find those opportunities and move forward. And it just sounds like we've had a lot of opportunity with this. Are there any other efforts or projects or perhaps communities within DoD that you want to talk about their data or the potential?
I mean, I can talk about healthcare for hours, as I'm sure anyone who's met me is aware. I will say the other community that I probably worked with the most during my tenure was the intelligence community. I will say, some interesting things about the IC in which they are somewhat similar to working with the healthcare community, in that there's a tremendous amount of regulatory risk when you deal with a community that has a tremendous amount of very specific regulations on the handling of data, the attribution of data, and all those sorts of things. I would argue that one of the things that I think comes up with the IC is, and this is you see this across DoD, is that there is a strong bias that if you can't deal with our most secret squirrel data, you're not providing any value, and I completely disagree. I think prediction algorithms can be trained on unclassified data, and in many cases be imputed into classified data and be relatively performant. I think there is a bias that classified data is the only correct data, which I think is dead wrong. And I think that there are many cases in which companies that are extremely successful at other types of hidden information problems, like say private equity analysis, that very similarly will do well in the IC. If you think about private equity, a privately held company is much run like a third world dictatorship in terms of power structures and information asymmetry structures. So I would argue that if you're good at figuring out a privately held company, maybe international privately held companies and their activities, you could probably give me a pretty good idea what's going on in North Korea too.
I haven't quite thought of it that way, but one of the databases that we have in DIU, I will say, easily rivals the best database I ever used at NSA. The difference, though, if that analyst for that company isn't good at their job, they get fired.
Yes.
That is the big difference.
Feedback loops are important. Incentives and
MBA
feedback loops. Here's some MBA talk coming here, Zach. Incentives and feedback.
Exactly. Yeah. Reward B, incentivize A doesn't work out that well. No, that makes a lot of sense. So tying it all together, right? I mean, you really are the person that is at all the center of all of these Venn diagrams, right? And I mean, you've seen so much. You have the MBA hat, you have the PhD hat, tremendous amount of expertise and impact in DoD. When you look at all that, moving forward, any advice that you have both for the Defense Innovation Unit and perhaps our other defense innovation comrades, and then DoD in general? I mean, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I mean, I think I'll start with DIU. I'll move from least personal to most personal. So I'll end with my notes for DIU. I think in general for the DoD, Um, I I'm very hesitant of folks that jump to the solution before fully understanding the problem. As an intelligence analyst, I think we can all appreciate, and then as a scientific analyst, we can all appreciate when the boss says, I need analysis that shows X. And they're already telling you what your conclusion is before you've started doing it. That's always bothered me. So I think that the DoD writ large could do a lot better job of like ensuring they have fully understood the problem. And I will take a note from Steve Blank, in that you go to your customers for their problems but not their solutions. I would argue that the DoD partners need to talk about the problems they need to solve, not the methods to solve them. Let us like examine the range of methods better, because we might surprise you with other unique and interesting ways to solve enduring problems, and they might cost like 1/10 of the method you had in mind. Such was the case for what Kessel Run was able to accomplish, and I think is the case for a lot of other things that the DoD can accomplish. My notes for DIU is I would say try to stay true to your founding principles. Remember that you're designed to be an outsider. You're not designed to adopt all the trappings of the organization that you are there to protect and improve. You are where you are to be a separate voice and retain that distinct individuality, lest you become, one of the other past versions of the whiz kids. And there's many of these old legacy organizations, Checkmate or Rand or whatever. I can't name too many without offending folks, but every kind of era of the DoD had their group of whiz kids that just fully institutionalized. It may be inevitable, but I would argue push back against it and retain your core identity.
What are you up to these days? How are you using all those different hats you have?
So I'm currently working as a data scientist. I decided there's a career mentor of mine, Joel Young, who is a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel as well, who's a engineering director at LinkedIn right now. And one of the things he said is like, you're only going to get one more chance to be an individual contributor in your career. Many veterans, will find themselves in leadership very quickly. So he told me to enjoy the first, 6 months to a year and find an IC role where you could just be one with the data again. So I've taken on a data scientist role at a startup named Gusto, and I'm kind of enjoying just doing the math for a little while. I know it's only a matter of time before other concerns will enter the fray, but I kind of I like being close to the technical problem for a little bit. I feel this is back to do of the do, learn, teach, and probably a fair amount of learn as well of the 3-point career that I talked about earlier. So I'm kind of enjoying being a little bit more execution side.
Yeah, you really have lived up to that mantra, and certainly on behalf of DIU and the DoD that you recently separated, thank you for doing that and giving back so much to the department that you came from. It's really appreciated.
It was a pleasure. It was. I'm particularly happy that I ended my career at DIU. I'm particularly happy that the last note in my career is one that I definitely consider most impactful. So I think it. I'm not saying come to DIU and then transition out to Silicon Valley because we absolutely need the talent back in the service. But I will say that it was a great place to have a last assignment because of the walking away and feeling that impact was delivered.
Absolutely. And you definitely had that impact. Again, thanks, Ryan, for everything you did. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks, Zach.